Mildred? How could you? She's your sister.
You always said we should share. Well, she won't. She won't share. She never did. Not you. Not anybody.
Oh, my poor darling Gina. Do you think she blames me? Do you think last night she was trying to hurt me for keeping it from her all these years?
Or hurt herself?
I must go to her, speak to her.
Carrie Louise, perhaps you should speak to them both. Together, perhaps you can lay this particular ghost to rest.
I'll finish my tea first.
I think we would all sleep a lot better in our beds if there weren't quite so many secrets in the world.
How much do you know?
If I was quite sure.
Oh, I think you're sure.
What do you want me to do?
The only thing you can do.
Just as soon as I finish my tea. It was Johnny Restorick gave me the idea to think of this room, not just the drawing room, a little to the left if you wouldn't mind. Just so. Not just the drawing room, but as a stage set. There. An evening of dramatics. The usual entrances and exits, and backstage, of course, outside on the terrace. The audience, myself included, sat here, hoodwinked by a conjuring trick. They do it with mirrors.
Mirrors?
Oh, isn't that the common slang? A few simple acts of misdirection. First, the power cut.
You think the lights were meant to go out?
Oh, I'm quite sure of it. You recall the power cut earlier in the day, set off by the spotlights being tested before supper? Well, the fuse box was then primed to blow a second time when the circuit for the drawing room was overloaded.
Oh,
blow.
Wiring's on the blink.
I'll go and check the fuse box.
The American, Wally Hunt?
Oh, which brings me to the second misdirection. Here. Would you mind?
Yeah.
The hidden door.
Yes. Now, here we deduced was the killer's hidden exit. And with the lights out, of course, nobody could be sure of anything, leaving you, Inspector, with a far wider cast of suspects. Mm-hmm. But what if the door had nothing to do with the murder? What if the killer made a far simpler escape? Never underestimate the power of the obvious, Inspector.
Indeed. So...
Would you... Now, two men step through the French windows onto the terrace. But what did we see? What did we actually see? Edgar Lawson, of course. But what became of Mr. Sericold? We heard him.
Thank you, Mr. Sericold.
Edgar.
Shh! Oh! Nobody move! That's enough.
Another trick. Edgar was simply mimicking the voice of...
Louis Sericold.
The kill would have taken no time at all. No more than your sergeant's 1 minute and 7 seconds.
But why? I never saw a man so devoted to his wife.
Quite. But how do we know there really was a poisoner? Look at the evidence. Carrie Louise's arthritis was coincidence, nothing more. And her tonic, mixed at the 11th hour with a very few drops of arsenic, intended not for Carrie Louise, but for you and your colleagues to discover. A few words were then added to the letter when Mr. Sericold looked in on the body.
I have reason to believe she is being slowly and cold-bloodedly poisoned. I first suspected this when...
And the meaning was quite altered.
So there never was any plot to poison Mrs. Sericold?
No, Inspector. And I'm sure Johnny suspected as much. Hence his rather odd desire to trim Carrie Louise's fingernails a few minutes before he died. A sample of nail clippings would have soon proven there was no arsenic in her bloodstream.
But how could he possibly...
But there, in the garden, on his way up to the house, he had a glimpse backstage, as it were. Even through the fog, gunshots and footsteps. And when Johnny befriended Ernest at the facility, I'm sure he began to piece together the hidden story behind the poisoning hoax. And as for all those treats in Ernest's room, a single malt whiskey, the keys, the oysters, they weren't stolen. They were gifts from Louis Sericold. Grateful tokens to a man whose rare talent for fraud and embezzlement had helped restore the fallen fortunes of the Gulbranson Trust.
But why? An upstanding gentleman like that.
The things we do for love. Wasn't that the way you put it, Mr. Sericold?
Quite right.
Jane.
Christian Gulbranson had discovered your slide into financial corruption and sought to expose it. Only his affection for Carrie Louise gave him pause. Was her heart strong, you see? You must have known he was on to you the last time Christian came to Stony Gates, when the trustees convened 7 weeks ago. That's when you conceived your plan, wasn't it? First the fire, started not by faulty wiring, but by your accomplice, Whitstable Ernest, concealed behind the hidden door. Only he left a few telltale drops of petroleum, the smell we took for diesel on the floorboards. The real target of those flames wasn't your wife's photographs or even her will. It was the accounts records housed in the filing cabinet. It bought you some time, but you knew Christian couldn't be put off forever. And so you were ready to silence him when he next came to Stony Gates.
The reform facility ate up all we had. The buildings, the endless privileges. It was the only way. I poured everything into it. The trust. My own fortune. It was a last resort. You see that, don't you? It was the only way I knew to make you happy. If you found out.
You didn't have to prove yourself to me.
With Johnny Restrick waiting in the wings.
Johnny?
I saw his letters to you. The man was unstoppable.
No, you were my husband.
You knew a little, didn't you?
I wondered when Johnny...
His new friendship had to be scotched before Whitstable Ernest let something slip. The arsenic and the oysters kept Ernest out of harm's way.
And Johnny?
A spontaneous killing, I would wager, as he stood under the path of that lighting apparatus. Waiting for a word with the leading man.
But you were on stage all the time. If it wasn't you... Edgar Lawson. Father?
Edgar! Sergeant!